Hi, and welcome to The View from Washington with The Hindu. I'm Sriram Lakshman, your host, coming to you from Washington, D.C. I'm here at the World Bank and the IMF, which are holding their annual meetings. We're going to take a look at some of what they said about India's growth and world growth rates. Finance Minister Balachandran is also here in D.C. on a visit for a few days to attend these meetings. And we're also going to look at the main news, which is the US elections, which are less than 2 weeks away. Take a look at what the candidates are saying and how they're polling. Stay tuned. So the IMF released its World Economic Outlook on Tuesday, and it forecast that India would grow at 7% in the current fiscal year, so the year ending March 31st, 2025, and 6.5% in the next year. The drop in India's growth from 8.2% in 2023, the IMF said, was because pent-up demand accumulated during the pandemic had been exhausted. The world economy is forecast to grow at 3.2% this year, 2024, as well as in 2025. The IMF called this a mediocre growth rate. However, the good news is that the battle against inflation globally has mostly been won, the IMF said. Global inflation was 9.4% in the third quarter of 2022, and it's expected to be 3.5% by the end of 2025. Many have felt the impact of this inflation over the last few years on their pockets. And the good news is also that through this disinflationary process, the world has avoided recession, even as multiple countries have simultaneously tightened their monetary policy. Now, there are downside risks to this outlook for this year and next, and in fact the chief economist of the IMF said that the downside risks are dominating. Mr. Pierre-Olivier Gourinchas, who is the chief economist, talked about protectionist policies in countries, conflicts. There is a conflict in Europe between Ukraine and Russia, as well as conflict in West Asia. So in an interview with the BBC, the deputy managing director of the IMF, Geeta Gopinath, said that the world could experience a loss in output of about 7%. That's the combined size of France and Germany's economy. And that's basically if there's a trade war. And she said to the BBC, if you have some very serious decoupling and broad-scale use of tariffs, you could end up with a loss of world GDP of close to 7%. Last week, you may recall that Donald Trump, in an interview to Bloomberg, said he would consider 100%, 200%, even 2,000% tariffs to protect American industry and to fund his tax cuts. So what's happening in the elections? Well, a gender divide seems to have appeared in terms of support for Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Donald Trump is leading Kamala Harris by 21 percentage points. In terms of support from young men, he's polling at 58% versus Kamala Harris's 37%, according to data from over three New York Times Siena College polls. Now, Kamala Harris is polling at 67% with young women versus Trump's 28%. So this is an even larger lead of 39 percentage points. So men and women of all ages also support Trump or Kamala Harris in a similar fashion. So men of all ages supporting Trump more than they do Kamala Harris, and women of all ages supporting Kamala Harris more than Trump, albeit the differences are less than when you look at younger populations. So Amy Walters of the nonpartisan Cook Political Report has pointed out that this is actually not inconsistent with what happened in 2016, the last time a man and a woman ran for the presidency. Hillary Clinton actually won the female vote by 15 percentage points, and Donald Trump won the male vote by 11 percentage points. So the candidates are basically focused in their campaign on two strategies. One is the 7 swing states. These are the 7 states that could make or break the elections. 2 is to extract as much support as they can from segments that are promising to them in terms of support. For example, Trump is focusing more on men, particularly young men, Hispanic men in general, black men and younger black men. Kamala Harris is focusing on women. She's also focusing in general on independents and undecided voters. I'll give you a couple of examples. Last week, Trump, along with Fox News anchor Lawrence Jones, visited a barbershop in the Bronx. There was a bunch of guys there. Most of them were African American or Hispanic. The owner of the shop was there, a young guy. His father was there. And Trump was talking to them about the economy, inflation, illegal migration, energy prices, and so forth. He tried to relate his policy and his platform to their day-to-day lives, including about the profitability of the barbershop. And basically, he was identifying with them. He even said, I'm basically one of you guys. I was born in Queens. He talked about his father and so forth.
Your energy bill from January 20th, if I win, we gotta win. And we're gonna, by the way, and we're in New York, and these guys love New York. If we win, oh, I love this guy. Look at that. Give me that hat. I'm gonna sign it. Come on, give me that hat. I love this guy. Thank you very much. That's beautiful. I'll sign yours too. Look at that one.
For her part, Kamala Harris was campaigning in swing states, and for some of these campaign events, she was joined by Liz Cheney. Liz Cheney is a former Republican congresswoman from Wyoming. She's a strong anti-Trumper, and she's also the daughter of Dick Cheney. Now, Dick Cheney was the vice president in the George W. Bush presidency. He was one of the proponents of the Iraq War, and Trump has criticized Harris for campaigning with Liz Cheney. But what Liz Cheney is doing is providing what's being called a permission structure for Republican women who are hesitant otherwise to vote for a Democratic candidate to take that step. And discussions in campaign events with Liz Cheney, but also otherwise, have focused on Trump's character, around the fact that he has authoritarian tendencies, that over 700 national security officials have endorsed Kamala Harris. Harris has also brought up the fact that John Kelly, Trump's chief of staff when Trump was president, had said that Trump wondered why his generals were not more like Hitler's generals. And in addition to this, Republican women especially have been asking about abortion and reproductive rights during these campaign events. And there's a sense that many of them did not foresee the unintended consequences of Roe versus Wade, which were general protections for reproductive rights, being overturned by the Supreme Court in 2022. So today, Thursday, October 24th, Kamala Harris is campaigning in Georgia with Barack Obama. This weekend, she's going to be campaigning in another swing state, Michigan, with Michelle Obama. Trump was in Georgia just yesterday, and he's been campaigning there in North Carolina. In Florida on Tuesday, Trump had a campaign event focused on Latinos. Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz, is also campaigning in North Carolina. So as we progress towards the elections, you're going to find the candidates campaigning only in swing states where the margins are extremely tight. So last weekend, I had the opportunity to go to Pennsylvania and observe a day of canvassing by this organization called Indian American Impact. Basically, their volunteers were going door to door to mostly South Asian households, alerting people to the fact that at the time there was a little over a day left to get registered to vote, and to also talk to them about Kamala Harris's candidacy. And at this event, you had lawmakers, you had authors, volunteers, and celebrities, including former model and TV producer Padma Lakshmi. Padma Lakshmi is originally from Chennai, which is where the maternal side of Kamala Harris's family, her mother Shyamala Gopalan, is from. Let's listen into what Padma Lakshmi had to say.
Here's where you really get to be a busybody Indian auntie. Okay, today you have license. I'm giving all of you license to go and really just try to make sure everyone knows that tomorrow in Pennsylvania is the deadline to register to vote. Okay, and in every exchange you have, please remind your neighbors and fellow citizens of that fact. Ask them if they have a voting plan. Ask them, if they're registered, and encourage them to get at least 3 to 5 people in their circle to make calls, to just please make that extra effort, because there's so much on the line in this election. It's really just, you all know, it's about a woman's right to choose, it's about fairness, it's about respect, it's about also respect for immigrants of all kinds. It's about respect for a woman making decisions about her own body with her own circle, not the government. It's about gun control. It's about not abolishing the Department of Education.
So also in Pennsylvania, I spoke to one of the organizers, executive director at iImpact, Chintan Patel. We talked about why Pennsylvania is so important to organizers of these activities. We discussed Kamala Harris's African American and Indian roots. Let's listen in. A sense that perhaps Vice President Harris has not embraced the Indian aspect of her identity electorally. This is a sentiment that's reflected among some parts of the diaspora. Are you seeing that at all? And when you see it, how are you addressing that concern?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it's another one of those like WhatsApp discourse conversations that do not bear out when you're having real conversations with voters. The truth of the matter is the Vice President has always embraced her South Asian heritage and her South Asian identity. She has talked a lot about how her mother's upbringing has affected and impacted her worldview. Even when we're talking about the caregiver's agenda, that was something that came out of her experience helping care for her mother as she, aged and was fighting cancer. So this is, her lived experience is very much a South Asian lived experience, and it is also a Black lived experience, right? She is, as a whole, she's a South Asian woman, a Black woman running for president.
So while I was in Pennsylvania at this event, I had the chance to catch up with Pramila Jayapal. She is the leader of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. She's a congresswoman, a Democrat from the state of Washington. And I asked her, is she concerned at all that Arab Americans are going to, in large numbers, sit out this election or vote for Trump because they're upset over the Biden-Harris administration's policies towards Israel, specifically as its offensive in Gaza continues. And she said she has been very vocal about the need for a ceasefire and that she shares their concerns, and that she's been saying that the US should use its leverage to curb Israel's use of offensive military weapons. But she has also been telling Arab Americans who have expressed these concerns to her that Donald Trump was the one who moved the US embassy to Jerusalem. He encouraged Benjamin Netanyahu to expand settlements. He appointed David Friedman as his ambassador, who had financial interests in expanding settlements. Donald Trump also instituted what's colloquially was called the Muslim ban, that is restrictions travel to the United States from several Muslim majority countries. And the full interview is available on the Hindu's website for those of you who are interested. That's it from me today, and thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.